today. So this is actually a short video explaining the positioning bingo card that we put out there a little while back and had a short article about. And I just really wanted to run through some of the sort of words on here because it may be obvious to those who already get the kind of value of positioning that some of these words are ridiculous words to have in positioning statements, but I feel like we should do a little bit more explaining of some of the words that sit within this. So some of the words have been covered before. So we start with efficacy. Well, again, remember efficacy, and we've got safety here. We've got best in class. Some of those things are easy to write down because you think that everyone agrees, but the kind of efficacy that you're bringing. Remember, efficacy just means that you work. Doesn't tell anyone what you do. It doesn't tell anyone why that matters or so forth. So everyone believes that efficacy is what people are looking for. Well, of course they are, but it's a catch-all word. It's an umbrella word for all of the things that your drug might do. So be specific. Tell us what your efficacy is. Tell us if there's an effect on symptoms or pathology. Tell us within your safety claim what your safety is. Is it an avoidance of minor side effects or serious side effects? Is it actually just a tolerability issue that you're looking to bring to bear? And then we looked at some of the sort of things like people, for physicians who want to do the best for their patients. Well, you think about the kind of arrogance of a statement like that, this kind of, somehow we're going to micro-target those physicians who want to do their best for their patients. Well, I haven't met many physicians who don't. And if you're somehow so in love with your drug that you think that you can arrogantly go out and looking for those physicians that just want to do the best for their patients, well, there's something wrong with the way that you're thinking about what your drug is bringing. It's a tool to help physicians do their jobs. And this kind of micro-targeting of like the sophisticated prescriber, that somehow if they were just clever enough, they could see the value in your drug, because that best for their patients, well, that's a choice that you have to tell them why they're making it. What's the value proposition that you're essentially bringing? And then we think about some of those kind of easy things that are easy to write down. So they're on here like drug of choice. It's really easy to write down. We want to be the drug of choice. Well, I want to know why someone would choose it. I want to be the drug of choice for physicians. Well, tell me. That's essentially a best in class proposition. We've got the word best in class here as well. I want to know what the class is that you're somehow choosing between. There's typically often direct competition, but there's often indirect competition as well. Well, if you're gonna be the drug of choice, well, you've got to explain the choices that people are making. What are the compromises that they're making to get to this of choice within there? So nice that you want to be it, but actually explain why and why your drug is that drug of choice. Same thing applies to these two first in class, best in class sort of challenges. So first in class is often easy. It's an absolute position, right? It sounds nice. We're going to be the first in a new class of agents that bring patients what? Nice to be first in class, but it's not self-evident what that means to anyone until you've then gone and explained what the class is going to do. Now remember that you probably then got on to help everyone else that's following you to explain what the class is for. More problematic is this idea of best in class. So it's got the word best in it, which you then have to go on and explain. So best has a quality. It's a choice. It's a way of saying, like, for all the drugs that you have available to you, ours is the best in this class. So you framed the class, you said we're in that class, and then you said we're the best. Well, best in class has to be best at something. So you might be faster, you might be more potent, you might be, whatever it is that you are, but best isn't self-evident. So you then got to go on and do that work to explain. So, a lot of those things that exist along those dimensions are easy to write down, but they don't mean anything, and that's why you have to go on and take the BS out of what you've written down. Then you get to the kind of when ad agencies are allowed to play with positionings, you start with a blank sheet of paper and then you end up with sometimes there's a quality of life dimension. So let's say you extend lives, but also you magically got a drug that also makes everyone happier and provides quality of life while they're doing that. So you end up with lines like more life in their years, more years in their life. Well, a bit like running down beaches with your golden retriever. Everyone has it, everyone does it, and it's an easy kind of concept to arrive at. But the problem is, everyone does arrive at it. So everyone arrives at it and then doesn't do any more work to explain how theirs is different at adding more years to your life and more life in those years. But actually, you then got to compete against everyone else that's saying the same thing, and begin to get somewhere different than that. So, and that would equally apply to a kind of concept like helping patients forget about their condition, or freeing them from the burden of disease, or expect more from therapy. These things that sound fantastic. You get to a workshop and everyone's buzzing, but patting each other on the back that they've got a kind of new ad campaign coming out, more years in their life, help people forget about their condition, or somehow you're going to help them lead better lives. Well, I want to know what you mean by better. What's a better life to lead? Sounds like there's a qualitative judgment there. It sounds like we're going to help them all bounce around like ad agency execs with, cups of Starbucks and bikes on the beach with their dogs. Well, that we need to be careful about helping someone lead a better life, because there's an inherent sort of judgment proposition sits within that. So then we think about the kind of other stuff that sits in here. This kind of, think about words like power. Well, power to do what? Power sounds nice. I'm going to empower people with a tool that's going to give them the power to change their, and it comes back to this essential challenge. It's a word that's easy to say, but that means nothing. So, and like most of the stuff that sits on here, it's really easy to get people to nod off and sign off. If you just wrote most of these things into a positioning statement, you'd probably have everyone sound quite happy about it. It sounds great, but it doesn't mean anything to anyone. But we can all go home happy because we just wrote down some nice stuff. Power links to something like perfect balance. Now, my issue with perfect balance I've described before starts with this essential challenge of efficacy and safety. And those words have their own problems. We just described them over and over and over again. Efficacy doesn't mean anything, neither does safety. But somehow you say, well, actually, we are the balance of those two things. So when you're looking for a drug, we're going to better balance those two problems. Well, actually, everyone's perfect balance of efficacy and safety isn't a balance at all. They want all the efficacy and they want no safety issues. So that's everyone's perfect balance. So how are you the perfect balance all of a sudden? Let's think about the fact that typically the efficacy that you're describing is a compromise. It's a choice between different kinds of efficacy. Same thing with the safety. So somehow you might think that you've just told someone something, which is that your net clinical benefit reaches its apogee at you. Well, it doesn't, because unless you're somehow curing people with a drug that's as safe as water, you didn't provide the perfect balance of safety and efficacy. So saying it to anyone or trying to help them believe it, well, they can go, well, it's a nice compromise. Of the compromises, it's a fine compromise. Well, that sounds a lot less exciting, right, than the perfect balance of efficacy and safety. And then think about other things like convenience. So convenience has that same basic issue. We're going to bring convenience to the table by making this, once a day pill somehow be better than a twice a day pill, or once a month is better than our once a day, or whatever it is. Well, think hard about the word convenience and what that impacts to, because convenience can be multifactorial. It can be patient preference, it can be physician preference, it can be that it's actually easier to take versus something else, it can be that it doesn't taste horrible, or it's easier to withdraw, or whatever. Well, say those things, because convenience doesn't do that work for you. Convenience will help get you in the game, but it won't help you get to the touchline with that particular drug. So, like, a lot of these things are things that we can all find easy to write down and agree to, because they all sound nice, right? They're all in the right ballpark, because that's what happens when you start to think about what your drug offers. But they don't get you to the touchline. They don't get you to the finish line, and they don't do the hard yards, the kind of non-BS kind of statement yards of saying what it is that our drug is bringing to patients, or why I should believe it's somehow differentiated. So those words that are like, if you talk about physicians want to do the best for their patients, or for physicians who should expect more from their therapy, well, that's nice. Somehow our drug is the gold standard, best in class, perfect balance of everything. Well, again, that sounds fantastic, right? But I don't know what you're talking about. And then talk about the fact that it's kind of reasons to believe is it's offering convenience or power, or somehow it's the first in class agent. Well, those kind of statements, great. you know, they're nice, everyone spent a nice afternoon, but no one wrote anything down that matters to anybody. And that's the fundamental problem, and that's why you should, you know, review all of the statements. And if you get any of these words in, you know that you got to do more work. And that's the only real point of what I want to get across here. So thank you very much.